Welcome to Turning Point, the real estate show that defines your edge by empowering agents for the future. And now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your host, Gil Sperling.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gil Sperling. I'm one of the founders and co-CEO of Flow. Welcome to our second episode of The Turning Point. We had a really successful first episode. It was our pilot episode, and we had hundreds of agents tuning in, and we had some fantastic feedback. And with that, we're carrying on our mission, which is to bridge this gap, this divide in the industry, and educate the industry where we can with experts like Ted and Nic, who we have on our show today, who will introduce shortly, and bring through this expertise and try and demystify and simplify how an agent can be enabled and empowered in a world where reaching people is actually all happening digitally. So with that, let me introduce to you Ted Frazer, who's the marketing director at Seeff, and Nic Warrington, the creative director at Prop Data. And of course, I must mention that we are doing this in association with Prop Data, and also in collaboration with Broll, whose studios these are. So thank you guys for being a part of this with us. Again, it's an industry effort. Cool. We've got a few slides prepared for you, and we're all going to talk through them together. Essentially, we are going to walk through 3 design tips that we have for ads that actually attract more attention in order to build your brand as an agent and as an agency, and ultimately to generate leads and bottom line. Let's pull up the slides. Cool. So our first tip is pretty simple, right? And this is something that I think is so obvious, yet not done, right? All you got to do is just tell your audience what to do. We call it the call to action. Okay, so when you have an ad and you're putting out an ad, or even typing out an email, that we found with a lot of data that as long as you just tell people what to do, click here to buy, click here to inquire, click here to get a valuation, those are calls to action, and that's what drives action. Ted, what are your experiences with this when you present the Seeff brand, right, and in your marketing paraphernalia, and how you position a call to action, where you found that it matters for you and your business?
Yeah, thanks. Well, firstly, thanks a lot, Gil. Hi, everyone. Good to be here. So it's interesting, actually. The call to action, obviously, is that kind of cutting edge. It's what everyone looks for. I mean, I often talk about one of the positives of the digital realm, as we know, is the ability to track and measure and analyze exactly what people are doing. And often I think we look, if we don't get that crucial conversion or click-through rate, we kind of want to understand why. And that's obviously, if you start working your way back, it's about that call to action, getting someone to do something. Generally what we find, though, is that it's the very end of the process. So often you've got to look a lot further back to understand, was it relevant? Because remember, someone's only going to click, they're only going to do something if the overall offering or everything that you said before that was relevant to them. So often I think of a good analogy is, if a classic retail store goes on sale, everyone thinks that it was the sale that got everyone to come running in, and it's actually not. It's everything that the store did in the years preceding that got people to understand what the store offered, what they did. Right. The sale, which is the kind of the traditional call to action in that respect, obviously just said, hey, we're cheaper, so come and get it. So I think what we often find is that if the call to action isn't strong enough, instead of just looking at, maybe we didn't word it properly, sometimes we actually have to think a little bit more than that and think, was the offering maybe not accurate enough? Did it not entice someone? Because if your offering or what you're saying isn't going to entice someone, they're never going to act. They're never going to take that action you want them to. So I think it's generally always a function of looking at the whole picture, with the call to action being the very end process that we want people to do, and making sure that we've got everything set up properly, that it entices them, it attracts them, it makes them interested in it, so that they will kind of take the action we want them to.
Right. And I think in our last episode, we actually spoke of the funnel, right? Yeah, the funnel being that you've got the piece at the top where you just tell people about what you do, or tell people that you exist, right? Yes. And then let them consider it, and so on. And as you say, as you reach the point of action, point of later consideration and even viewing, purchase, phone call, that's when you actually just got to make it clear. Nic, so as you guys do a lot of work, and you see it across brand, and of course for the Prop Data brand yourself, where you're trying to grow as a business, but again, you guys design the websites for a lot of your clients and the materials around it. How have you seen this work across brands?
Yeah, thanks, Gil. Thanks. Hi, Ted, and hi, everyone out there. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I think, in terms of CTAs, like you said, the most important thing is just to keep it short and sharp. Like Ted says, you're setting them up for that CTA. So yeah, I think just keep it short and sharp. Like, when you're looking at a web page, which is more the work that we do, you only have one view, and you're bringing across one concept at a time. And for social media, as you're scanning through, there's a lot of competition, so you want that CTA to kind of stand out straight away. You don't want to have someone like think about it too much, and it's just be like, okay, I've got the gist of what you guys are trying to bring across, and the CTA is like a no-brainer, because there's a lot of other visual cues when you're scrolling through a Facebook feed or you're on a website. So just keep it simple. I think that's the big thing for CTAs.
Yeah, I think. Go ahead, Ted.
Sorry, Gil. Yeah, I was saying, I think one of the traps, and Gil, I mean, we've had this chat before quite often, is that, if you think about the classic impressions, click-throughs, conversions, it's amazing how everyone only seems to worry about the conversion. We often hear, like, oh, I only got so many leads, or I only got so many people click through. And we lose sight of the fact that, one of the big opportunities within the digital realm is the impression side. It's getting people to actually see the brand. What does that mean in their world? So that ultimately, when they do take the action you want them to, remember, at that point, the agents then going to pick up with that individual and engage with them. And you want the whole sort of thread to be seamless, so that when they finally do take that action, it's because they understand the brand, they understand the offering, they now have taken that action, they now have converted, but now you hopefully want to deliver on whatever it is you've told them. So I think the promise on that call to action is really vital, that you live up to it when you actually then start engaging with them on the ground.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I mean, just to reiterate that first piece, because when someone is selling their home or buying the home, it's a massive transaction. It's emotional, it's stressful, and you're going through like weeks and months of thinking about it and considering it, which is the consideration phase, which is why that impression value, just being there, is important, right? And perhaps
often overlooked.
It is, and those metrics are absolutely key. Down the line, you will have a conversion on all sorts of channels where you can then implement this call to action where it needs to be clear. Yeah. But it does start with being top of mind, and which is the opportunity on these digital channels. And let's jump to our next slide, Nic. I think with what you were saying in terms of the noise, right? So you're flipping through your news feed, right? You're going like this with your thumb. That's how quick it is. You can attract the guy in less than a second. How can you grab his attention? Okay, and how do you stand out among the noise? Well, here we go, right? That's a great example. It's a visual medium, right? It's immersive, and you're going to stop on something that is attractive. And so the best thing that you can do when you're creating your listing or presenting your brand is go that extra mile on the photography, right? Yeah. And of course, that's when you're doing your listings, never mind your brand and when you're promoting your brand itself, or even when you're promoting sold stock, just like Ted, to your point, all you got to do is be out there. And if you're telling people, look at the stock I've sold, and they see something visually impressive, that is how you're going to grab attention in the beginning to follow on with a call to action. So Nic, I interrupted you.
No. And photography, I mean, this is the biggest part of these ads, when we're talking about these ads is, everything else is going to blur into the background if the photo is terrible, it's almost we're saying to make it stand out, but a bad photo is going to do it can do as much damage on the other side, because it's almost like people say like, oh, that you don't even almost care about the way you're presenting that property, So I think it's critical. I think photos are, it's the biggest part of the ad. It's, as you scanning through, and we all know how fast we move through social media feeds. It's all on your phone these days. People just move past it if they can see that no care has been taken in presenting that property. So I think it's critical. We take when we're doing our brand, any brand messaging ads, we'll be very, very we'll spend a lot of time looking for the right stock image, or an illustration or whatever. But the same amount of effort needs to go into property images when we use them for listing ads.
So it's true. I mean, Nic, to jump in, I think it's such an interesting topic, this in itself, because I remember there's a kind of a dying generation. I think they sort of are crying somewhere, called professional photographers, and I think what's happened is that the more advanced we found, because of cameras on phones, obviously a lot of the times agents end up taking their own pics. I remember once, and it was almost it's now done as a kind of a reference joke internally, but there was once sort of a property image taken where in the property image you saw the rear view mirror of the agent's car, because they literally took it from their car seat. But it illustrates the point, I think, is that if anyone out there's been on the receiving end of dealing with an agent, you'll know is that it does make a difference when it's your single biggest transaction. And you want to make sure that that not only is the service care taken, but the level of quality in terms of how the property is going to be promoted is really, really vital. And investing in a either making sure that you are going to take the time to, if you're taking the pics yourself, make sure that you really do take the time. But certainly looking at professional photography, I think, is one of the big overrated or sort of underutilized aspects that you can't really emphasize enough, without question.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that age-old saying that the first impressions last. And when so first of all, you're on a digital medium, right? Which is the point of this, is that you want to attract that attention. The value, of course, is that the first impression lasts, and you've immediately made some assumption or some opinion of the property while looking at these photos. And when you arrive, you're already on a different gear, right? And so it matters all the way down the chain.
Absolutely.
Right.
And also, when you think about it, it's not just, so we always think, oh yeah, okay, it's just the quality, but there's a lot of other factors to consider. Are you taking it in the evening or not? Some luxury properties are nicely lit in the evening, for example. Which angle are you taking? Those kind of things are often overlooked. And I think
some properties are a challenge. Some properties, there's no doubt,
Correct.
So, if you've got budget constraints and you have to do it yourself, I would say, look, there's lots of resources out there about how to do these things in the best way you can. Maybe it's a little bit of staging. We could probably have a webinar or two just on the subject.
Filters, Nic. You've got to get filters.
But it's critical not only to represent the property, but you're representing your brand with these images.
Yep.
And I think when people see that you've taken the care to present your clients' properties in the best possible light, it reflects better on the brand. So
yeah. And you see it still. Dare I say it, you can look on most websites. It's amazing when you start looking through different properties and you see that things, for example, that they haven't bothered cleaning up certain things. So there's certain things lying on the floor, for example, all those smalls. And I'm sure people out there are nodding saying, oh, but that's obvious. But just have a look out there and you'll see clearly it's not obvious enough. So there's the quality. It's to your point, some level of staging, or at least making sure that certain things, that the house looks tidy. Exterior, what time of the day you're shooting, is it properly lit? There's so many different factors, but I would imagine that in most I mean, even look at this webinar right now, 90% of it's visual, so people are going to make or break that decision. I would imagine that the image of the property, which is kind of what we're speaking about now, is going to be made or broken, sort of within the first few seconds based on the quality of the photography, without question.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, let's jump to the next slide. Let's take a look at the next tip. So we
just a quick one there, Gil, on the images. It'd be interesting to know, because with your ads, if you're doing a single image ad, like what gets a better response? Is it like what room would be a better, like what do guys want to see in terms, if it's like a single image, like or maybe it's different for different properties, but like do guys, is it better to see like an exterior, or is it better to see like the best interior photo you can get?
Yeah, I mean, from our experience, it's actually the exterior, especially for like the mid-range sort of priced houses where you can actually get a view of like the whole house. It's almost like what's aspirational. But where you have like a sea view or a mountain view or whatever from the lounge, also that's, it's about how you can make the person feel aspirational. You're selling the sizzle, right?
Yeah.
So and the exterior works well, and a great view when it's available. That's been our experience. And yes, in a single image ad.
Yeah.
Just quickly, because I know we're talking just about the listings, but touching on what we've spoken about now throughout, which is the brand side of it. Remember, images are not just of the listing. In a lot of the cases, it's also images of the agents. And I think a lot of the times that also just think about, just look at us on the call right now. There's perceptions that are created based on our backgrounds, what we're wearing, all those kind of things. Similarly, when people look at agents, images, a lot of that says, do I want to deal with this individual? How are they dressed? Are they professionally dressed? Are they smiling? All those kind of things. So there's a lot of factors to think about, not just in the quality of the pic, but also, the staging of the home if it's a listing, but also your own appearance in terms of how you come across, because it's a mix then of both the corporate brand that you're representing and your own personal brand.
100%, yeah, and remember that's really like it's two sides, because you're and we'll talk about it in a bit, but when we run our ads and we've got these templates that you kind of click through and pick templates, and Ted, we've got like the Seeff templates that is used in your organization, where even when you do a listing ad, your agent photo is a big part of that template, right? And it's overlaid. Yes. So if you would have invested in the photography for the listing, imagine how much more impactful it is when you as the agent have this professional appearance. 100%. And it's 1 + 1 = 11.
Not wanting to kill the time here, but I can tell you without question that with our group, the branches that make a focus on photography are without a doubt at the top. And interestingly to what you've just said now is that the branches that make, that focus on the photography for the listing, invariably they do the same for their personnel as well. And it works like a charm.
Right. Okay, cool. Let's flick through the next slide. There's the result of it before we move on to the third tip, right? Here's the ads. So you can see that first ad, right? The staging for one, the lighting, the angle. So, it's a picture of the carpets and, the tire of the bike. But on the second one, it's just far more aspirational. That could be a 90 square meter apartment, but look at how it looks like. Who wouldn't want to have a lounge like that? And you come in with that impression. And then again, those templates is what Flow assists with the for sale band and the logo and the photo of the agent where the template allows for it. And the stat really is 61% of listings with professional real estate photography receive 61% more views online. And they, of course, sold much faster because that value goes all the way down. So you're not just selling cheese and trying to hook someone and clickbait them. It plants that impression right up front so that when you come to the viewing, you're already half sold on it.
And the templates are great, Gil. I think there was some stats done recently around, what barriers are there for people. And sometimes it's a mix of, they don't know where to start or they don't have the time. And I think this kind of tackles both.
Right. Yeah. That's what we try to do, is we try, of course, to simplify the process, because a big part of doing social media ads is that you do need to use a designer. And, you know, many of the groups have a centralized marketing sort of department who you obviously stand in a queue, and some agents know how to use Canva, and, you know, even that, you still got to be a bit of a pro. And so with Flow, that's what we've automated. It's just a couple of clicks, and it's we of course do a group specific template. So Ted, yours are obviously approved by yourself for any Seeff agent to use. And which brings us to the next slide now, which is really around the brand CI, right? And I think this is quite key, and I think it's overlooked often. And it's not just out of a brand like Seeff who is imposing certain parameters on how the brand should use, but the impact of using a brand like Seeff, who has been around for 60 years, and the equity and the trust behind the Seeff brand. And of course, you know, like any other groups, but like if we use Ted, like the Seeff brand is a powerful brand in the industry. It's trusted, it's reputable, it's credible. And what you've been doing over these decades is planting that impression in people's minds, which is where we say be top of mind. And you've done it, right? So any agent that is part of Seeff, start off with that. You know, you start off on that level. So, and with CI, we're talking about the font, the colors, the actual logo and the positioning of the logo. And someone who's not design minded might say, "Oh, what's the difference? I'll just, I'll do it a pixel more." It makes a massive difference.
Yeah.
Go for it, Ted.
Yeah, look, thanks for that. Look, I mean, I think, thanks for that accolade, but I think I'm seeing myself more as a custodian for this thing that was around, dare I say, before I was born, and it'll be around long after I'm left, I think. But it's interesting. There's a couple of things just to touch on that. So to your point, I think the reason why a CI or a corporate identity or a logo for this discussion is so important is because if you've done everything correctly, it's almost the signature that brings all that recall to mind. So if you think of any brand, it doesn't have to be in our industry. If you think of any brand, if you see their identity, it could be a car brand, it could be another tech brand, but whenever you see like a Facebook logo, for example, it's everything that goes behind that. So it's so important then that you get the positioning right, as the logo is going to recall, hopefully, those elements. From our perspective, though, is that there are two key things for any CI. The one is you want to make it, whatever it recalls must be creating some sense of differentiation in your mind, especially if you think about our industry. There's so many different players, at the long end of the tail as well as the group end. Your key job is, you need to be different in some way, but most importantly, and that's what I think we'll touch on now, is it must be distinctive, so that, when people see your identity, it very quickly, yes, that's Seeff or another brand. So we talk about having sort of a series of brand codes. What are those sort of 3 or 4 elements that together create that element of distinctiveness? And then, as you've seen in your templates, I think, there was a job really well done, where you try and bring in as many of those codes in every single brand expression that you do. So if it's online, if it's a board, if it's car branding, it doesn't really matter. You want to make sure that when people see it, it immediately is Seeff, and it brings them to mind everything that hopefully makes us different. And that's the kind of the standard science that I think all brands, or even agents out there, the same thing. We talk about, your personal brand. What is it that's going to make you distinctive and different, especially in areas where there are a lot of agents competing?
Right. And Nic, what Ted's saying is that it's ultimately if your brand has its strength and you are top of mind, that your association, your click is instant, right? And you've got this experience across brands who are all vying to stand out and to have that association with that brand. And again, it's not just the colors and the font, it's what it stands for. And you just know it like this, right? And when you do need to make your decision of who should I sell my home with, it's a combination both of that brand, but also that agent. Like you say, Ted, you're establishing your personal brand, and you do have the opportunity to stand out in your area and in your niche, right? So Nic, what's your, seeing it across brands?
Yeah, we've always said that there's 2 main differentiators for a real estate company. Well, and that is your brand and your service. those are the ways you're going to stand out from everyone else, you know. So, and brand is obviously, it's a lot bigger than your CI. It's the way you answer the phone. It's the way you dress. It's your, you know, there's things like Ted says, your car branding and your website, and it's everything, you know. It's the way you talk and you do all of those things. That's your brand, you know. It's like, it's encompassing a lot more than just the visuals you see in ads and on boards and things like that. And it's very powerful, but it needs to be seamless. Like, you need to, when someone, you know, goes on a property journey with your company and they see a board and they go to the website, and then they call an office, or they come into the office, they see, you know, ads on social media. There's got to be that thread so that the journey is consistent, you know. So the CI has got to be, you know, like you say in the slide there, all the fonts and all of that stuff has got to be consistent throughout. So that's where these templates are great. You know, we leverage templates in Prop Data with brochures and email templates and all of that, and it's critical so that it takes all the thinking out of you know, creating that seamless journey from an agency perspective, because it's all done, you know.
Yeah, Nic, I mean, I can say, guys, I mean, it's interesting, the mix on the call. I mean, as you know, we kind of, I mean, both Flow and Prop Data are kind of very kind of strong service providers for us, and you guys do a great job, specifically on what Nic's talking about now, which is that kind of consistent, seamless thread through everything. It's probably a good point. I mean, here we're talking heavily about tech, and it's interesting because I think a lot of agents, and certainly within the industry, I think a lot of the mistakes, sometimes we always make the mistake of looking from the inside out. So we sit behind the desk and we're thinking now with a tech head on. But if you think about the audience, you know, and even if you think about us as users, you know, we engage with, you know, practically, not only are we on digital now, but, you know, we were all on our phones or in front of our screens before this meeting. We go straight back into it afterwards. I mean, practically, you know, we're digitally consuming pretty much most times of the day. But I don't think we stop and think we're having a digital experience. You know, when you just, you know, you go on WhatsApp, you go on Facebook, you go wherever, you're suddenly outside, you know, you're exposed to brands across a range of different kind of touch points. But at no point do we consciously stop and think, you know, this is an offline experience, this is an online experience. We're just having an experience with a range of brands where they choose to present themselves to us. It just so happens that a lot of the time we can obviously see them online. And I mean, I think the key thing there is that it's so important to make sure that you've got that consistent thread throughout, so that no matter which touch point a user's having, it's going to be the same experience. It's going to bring the same recall to the same brand.
100%. And if we just jump into the last slide and tie it all in, so ultimately, that, you know, that, like you're saying, Ted, when you're on your phone, what do you do different, right? So if I need to do digital advertising now on social media and appeal to people, because that is where they're spending their time, what do you need to do different? You know, it's digital. I don't know. It's tech. I'm intimidated. It's not, right? Because what we've spoken about today are principles that haven't changed. They've never changed. Right? Even if you had to do it in the old school newspapers, is that your photography needs to be top class. Invest in your photography and in your own profile. Follow your brand CI where it's there, because there's been millions invested by many groups to make sure that equity stands, right? And so that's what we're saying. And then it's you know, it's up to again, without pitching here. That's what Flow does. It assists in bridging that gap in terms of that digital piece, the technical part of it, and that's what we have on the slide here. You know, so that's, if you look at that Seeff ad.
Just blow it up there, Gil. I got it.
Yeah.
No. But I think just, you know what, I would touch on those. I know we're running out of time, but I can tell you now, and this is really kind of a shout out to the whole audience. And I think what you're showing there, Gil, and I mean, the stuff that Prop Data does as well, is a lot of the time what we find is that the barrier is often perceptual. I mean, these days, most tech platforms are intuitive. Most of them have tried to make themselves as user-friendly as possible. And I mean, you know, I often say, you know, if you can kind of craft a mail and insert an attachment, you can pretty much work through most of the platforms. You know, they are really intuitive. And specifically when you guys have kind of created templates and things like that to make it even easier. A lot of the time, I think this digital kind of barrier is seemingly so kind of huge and threatening. But if you actually just realize that all of us are engaging with it in some way or form most days, at the user interface side of it, a lot of it is also intuitive these days.
100%. Yeah, no, for sure. So yeah, thanks, Ted. I mean, I'm sure that's very meaningful to everyone. Nic, any last comments? I think it's time to
just keep it simple. Don't overthink it, guys. It's like 3 points to making an ad here, and I think if you stick to those, you can't go wrong. Don't overcomplicate things. Let the images, give them the breathing room. Very few details on these ads. I think like listing ads, you just need the type of deal you're promoting. If it's a for sale, the price and the location and a beautiful photo, and then you've done the job. Then just promote it through a platform and like Flow, and then you're good to go.
Yeah, Gil, I think, it was funny, we were saying like, let's try and disagree on things, but I mean, I can't disagree with anything that Gil, you or Nic have said. I think the key thing here is there's a couple of throwaway thoughts. I mean, I think, Gil, you'll get this as well. I think a lot of the times the industry looks at channel as a point of difference, and often it's not. There are only a limited number of channels out there. Think about social media channels, for example. It's about being different and distinctive, and often, let your market decide what that means. As across in our industry, there's so many different markets. There's some that are, coastal, inland, some are kind of more metropolitan, some are more rural. Your market's going to tell you how to be different, and then look at that and be distinctive within that. And also then, choose the platform and the channel that's going to be most relevant. And if in doubt, go to Prop Data and Flow,
Fantastic. Great. Thank you, guys. There was some great content there. I think that it was beneficial for everyone listening in. So that's a wrap. That was our second episode. I really am enjoying this, and I think we're gonna continue and have more guests coming on with their experience and their angles. And so, Ted, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Gil.
Nic, that was fantastic.
Thanks, Gil.
Again, I think it was enjoyable from all.
Yeah, thanks, Nic. Good to see you.
Yeah, and shout out to again Prop Data, who we're doing this in association with, and collaborating with Brol on this in terms of their studio and their infrastructure. Thank you so much, guys. We'll catch you later.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Good for watching.